Got to ask you this question. You once claimed you were first cousins with President Barack Obama. You're not, though, are you?
I never did claim that I was...
You told the BBC's World Today in January 2008 that Obama's father was your maternal uncle.
Yes, by extension, yes, because...
But Obama's uncle says no, Mr. Odinga is not a blood relative.
I'm not, but my mother and Obama's father come from the same clan.
Okay, so it's a tribal relationship, yes. Not a blood relationship.
No.
Okay, just sticking with Obama very briefly, when he visited Kenya last summer, he criticised Kenya's record on gay rights. Homosexual relations are illegal in Kenya. Do you still believe gay couples found engaging in homosexual acts should be arrested, as you said in 2010?
No, I would say that this is a matter of choice. And therefore, if people, it is not African, but we would say that people are allowed and are free.
But you said they should be arrested if they're caught in the middle of an act.
No. That was
caught on tape saying that.
Quoted out of context.
It's always out of context.
I was addressing a rally in my constituency.
Okay.
Kibera.
So just to be clear, you don't think gay couples in Kenya should be arrested?
No. They even say I didn't say they should be arrested. They said,
would you arrest gay couples as president of Kenya?
I have much more important things to deal with.
That's not an answer to my question. So you're not confirming or denying whether you're going to arrest gay couples if you're president?
No, the answer is no. That's what I'm telling you.
No, okay, we finally got to a no. Okay, let's go to our audience who've been patiently waiting here in the Oxford Union. We've discussed elections, vote rigging, violence, corruption. We've talked about the war in Somalia against Al-Shabaab. Who'd like to make some points, ask some questions as briefly? We'll go to this lady in the third row.
Mr. Odinga, security is about the most important thing in Africa. And terrorists thrive on division. They thrive on national conflicts. Are you not better off combining with the current government, having a cohesive approach in actually tackling terrorism?
I have always said, each time there has been a terrorist attack, the first person I've called or who has called me is the president. And each time we have given him an assurance that at times like this, there's no government or opposition. We all stand together as Kenyans to deal with this. So we are united in as far as the issue of fighting terrorism is concerned. There's no conflict about that. But aside from that, you need to know that we are a country. There's a role for government and a role for opposition. And I do believe that as the leader of the opposition, I'm playing my role very effectively, even by the UK standards.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. Let's go to the lady at the front, and then we'll go to the gentleman right at the back.
You were an MP for Kibera for 20 years. This is known as one of the biggest slums in Africa. It still doesn't have vital facilities, such as clean waters and toilets. Why didn't you manage to change things there, as both an MP and Prime Minister? And if you can't sort out your own constituency, can you really govern the whole of Kenya?
Thank you. Very good question. So Prime Minister was 5 years, and I did start slum upgrading program. The only slum upgrading program that exists in Kibera. It was started by me. So I did something when I was in government. I could not do anything much when I was in the opposition. But we started other projects right there, like we started building proper toilets in the area. We brought water into Kibera at that time. So, and we also started road construction.
Okay, so let's go back to the audience. I promised that gentleman right at the back.
With the collapse of the ICC case, is there a role for ICC in Africa going forward, given that the AU were actually working against the success of ICC? The
AU and ICC have said it is a hypocritical relationship. The AUs are not being honest with themselves because they are saying that ICC targets African leaders. And I've said it's hogwash. Nothing could be further from the truth. Most of the African leaders who are before the ICC have been referred there by Africans themselves.
Will you be sending Kenyans to The Hague when you're president?
If you ask me, when I come to power, I will set up a local tribunal, which was recommended by the Waki Commission, to try to investigate and try those who are guilty
let's go to the gentleman in the third row, and then I'll come to the lady in the second row. Do you want to wait for the microphone to come to you?
I want to ask a question about press freedom. Last year, 65 journalists in Kenya were violently assaulted. One was murdered, an editor, brave editor. You, as a champion of democracy, if you were returned to power, what would you do to reverse this deteriorating press freedom situation in your country?
The freedom of the press is something that we have fought so hard to achieve in Kenya, because there were times when journalists were being arrested and taken to detention. Unfortunately, the current Jubilee government does not believe in the freedom of express. Senior reporters are being sacked right now merely because they are writing articles which are critical of the government. If I come to power, I will ensure that we restore the freedom of the media in the country.
Okay, I promised this lady here in the second row, and then I want to go back to the back.
I'm quite ashamed to admit that as a Kenyan, it is a very tribal country. And if you came into power, do you think that you would do some miracle in such a way that a Kikuyu would be able to vote for a Luo, and a Luo would be able to vote for a Kikuyu?
Just for the purpose of our global audience, you are a Luo politician and the president is a Kikuyu politician.
Yes. Certainly, but look at it this way. Just look at the history. It has never always been like that. When Kenyatta was, the first Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta, was imprisoned, my father, who was a Luo, Odinga, led the campaign for release of Kenyatta. In 2002, I myself came up and said, Kibaki tosha. Kibaki is a Kikuyu with whom we had stood together, and I stood up and said we must support Mr. Kibaki as the candidate. And I'm a Luo. I went and campaigned, and the Luos voted to Kibaki 98.5% to Kibaki.
Of the three, just to be clear, of the three presidents Kenya has had, the Luos have never had a president of Kenya, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you believe that's a deliberate thing that's been done to your tribe?
No, it is relative, because Kenya is only 53 years. So, and Kenya has got 42 different tribes. So it's not only the Luos who have not had the presidency.
Well, Kalenjin has had a president in Daniel Arap Moi, and the Kikuyu. I'm just wondering if you believe that's a deliberate targeting of your tribe.
Kikuyu, Kalenjin, and another Kikuyu, and now they are talking about another Kalenjin. But I'm just saying...
global audience, it's hard to keep up, but it's a very good question there. I'm glad you raised the subject. Let's go to, I said I'd go back to the audience there. Gentleman in the middle there.
A quick question. Mr. Odinga, you have been very critical of African presidents who have refused to basically obey the presidential terms. And yet in 2010, you appeared to campaign for Yoweri Museveni. I'm just wondering whether that incident basically compromised your ideal and your message on criticizing African leaders.
It was a double standard campaigning for the Ugandan president.
Exactly.
No, actually, I did not campaign for Yoweri Museveni. I just joined him on the campaign. And
That's a real technical difference. I did not campaign for him, but I joined him on his campaign. Okay.
And I was basically using it to address the Ugandan people, because I don't choose the leaders for other African countries, Uganda included. But I have been very strong on the issue of respect for term limits. And I've been also very critical of President Museveni as well.
Okay. Lady there, do you want to wait for the microphone to come to you?
Thank you. Mr. Odinga, do you feel that corruption has impeded efforts by the Kenyan government to fight al-Shabaab and make Kenyans safer? And if so, what would you do differently to tackle corruption in the security sector?
The security sector requires reform so that you can deal with this issue of corruption, to reform the police and make it truly a people's police. The same thing also with the military. We want to first improve the living conditions of the security forces, the remuneration, the housing, and also the character, so that it can be an effective force in fighting terrorism.
Okay, I want to go to this gentleman there in the back. Yes, with the hat. He's been waiting a while. He's waving.
I campaigned for you more than anybody in London here in 2007.
Yes.
And I wrote to you asking you to work with the Kikuyus. You refused to work with the Kikuyus. Now it will be somewhere else. Are you going to work with the Kikuyus?
Did you say, gentlemen, did you say you campaigned for Raila Odinga in 2007?
I campaigned for him. He's my brother-in-law.
Okay.
I campaigned in 2007. But
could be an awkward family reunion later. Are you going to work with the Kikuyus?
But the thing is, I work with so many Kikuyus. One of my legal advisors, Mr. Paul Mwangi, is a Kikuyu. I've got so many Kikuyus working for me. It is that the Kikuyus have not voted for me because basically there is this propaganda that is being spread by ethnic chauvinists to keep them away from me.
Okay, hold on. I need to take the next question. Lady here.
People of my age, when we grew up, Raila was the man. You are our hero. But it looks like that name is going. Do you think it's wise putting the presidential bid aside and becoming an African advisor on leadership and politics? Don't you think there is a Nelson Mandela in you?
I'm not.
Thank you very much, my
To be fair, Nelson Mandela became president first before he passed. Just for the record.
I couldn't do better, yes, answer.
Okay, so once you're president, then you're going to take over. Gentleman there in the third row, yes, I promise. Yes, in the grey suit, yes, you. Yep.
We are talking here about corruption and insecurity and all other things. But as you and I know, Kenya is becoming more and more stratified as a society along the lines of those who can afford their security, i.e. shelter, food, and safety. If you happen to decide to run in 2017 and you win, what would you do to reverse this trend?
It is true that Kenya is one of the most unequal society, that the gap between the haves and have-nots is very huge. And that's the reason why we are saying that, our policy, we are saying we are a social democratic movement, and we are going to address the issue of distribution of wealth or resources and opportunity in the country to ensure that there's some kind of equity.
Okay, let's take one last question at the back there. Yes, gentleman there in the middle.
Ahead of 2017, there's growing factionalism within CORD, the coalition that you're a part of. What is your strategy to overcome this, to ensure that you have enough votes in the election?
I don't think that there's discord in CORD. CORD is fairly united. What we were talking about is who is going to be a candidate, the people are declaring. That, in my view, is democracy. So, like I said, I don't want to impose myself on the people. Only when the people want me is when I will be a candidate.
A lot of outside observers look at Kenyan politics and sometimes get a bit confused because there seems to be always a shifting alliances. 1 minute you're with William Ruto, 1 minute you're not. Everyone swaps from one election to another. You choose different allies. Many would say if you had underlying principles and ideologies, you wouldn't be able to just shift partners all the time in a quite cynical way.
You see, they say that politics makes of very strange bedfellows. Mandela could not have worked together.
Keep the same bedfellows, is what some might say.
I'm saying Mandela could not have worked with the clerk who represented the regime that had taken him to prison. So there is what we call strategic alliances, which you make, and the rest are tactics.
One last question. You stood against Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013. You're hoping to stand against him again in 2017. His father was the very first president of Kenya, and your father was his vice president, the first vice president of Kenya. 50 years later, two sons are fighting over the presidency. Isn't it time for Kenya and for Kenyan politics to move beyond these two political dynasties of the Kenyattas and the Odingas and have some fresh faces? Some new names, some fresh faces at the top. Isn't it time?
How I would love to see that happen. The decision, as the Kenyans, the decision is not Uhuru's or Raila's.
Well, you could both step aside.
No, the Kenyans can well shunt us aside.
Okay.
It is not Raila Odinga imposing himself on the people. It's the people who will vote for Raila Odinga because of what Raila Odinga represents. And that's my view, is an exercise in democracy.
And on that note, we're going to have to leave it there. Raila Odinga, thanks for joining me on Head to Head. Thanks to our Thanks to our audience here in the Oxford Union. Thanks to our panel of experts. Thanks for watching at home. This debate will continue.